Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Hope you had a good break. We had a nice little break, didn't we? So listen, we're joined by three senior people in the industry. We're going to get into really what's the role of a strategy lead and a chief investment officer. Where does out-of-home fit, in this sort of ever-increasing complex world? And then I think the big question is, what does out-of-home need to do to grow? So let's get into it. Marcy, why don't we kick off? Tell us about your role as Chief Investment Officer at UM.
Sure. I would say I'm primarily focused on anything that's marketplace related, so all of our partnerships. But then I would say where I spend a lot of my time is really in helping our clients navigate that marketplace. I think it's become so complex across channels, within channels, how technology and data have enabled a lot, but also just created complexity. The way that how consumers consume media is completely different and at odds sometimes with how sellers sell media, and making sure that our clients understand that to reach people the way they're consuming it, you might need to buy it differently. So it's honestly a lot of, I'd say, education, thought leadership, and just helping them navigate.
Brian?
Yeah, my team and I think of ourselves as client business partners first and foremost. We like to think of our first primary goal is to understand our client objectives and how marketing at large can address those objectives, and then underneath that, how media can contribute. So it's that waterfall of objective and then strategies to achieve them. I always tell my team, if the first sentence out of your mouth is about some sort of media mix or media solution, you've missed the mark. We got to really think about our clients' business goals first and foremost, and that's where we spend our time.
Okay. Kelly?
Carrying up the rear, all right. So, this is a very dark room. Is everyone enjoying the darkness? Right. So if you think about the challenges of being a chief investment officer, it really is answering the question, where is my client's dollar best spent next, truly? And that's a constant partnership with strategy and planning. But it's also, as Marcy was describing, detailed knowledge of the partners and the technology that compose our very diverse marketplace right now. And it is more complex than ever, as Marcy described. But there's so much opportunity there. Out of home is absolutely one of those opportunities that is potentially being undervalued by the data that's available, honestly, to teams. So if you think about what a chief investment officer means to out of home, you do have to get in front of them. You do have to provide meaningful data around reach and capacity, both at the national and local level. And you have to be really, really, really creative in terms of how you break through, because the amount of partners that end up in my inbox, which is not a clean, healthy place. That's not a good place to be, my inbox. It's the same messaging. It's AI this, AI that. It's a lot of jargon. You really have to be creative about what you're bringing to the table to break through with a chief investment officer in these times. And that's really the advice I would give about how you're going to interact with a chief investment officer and their teams, because we're inundated, honestly. There's just so much happening across the entire marketplace. And that's really where I see out of home shining right now, because of digital out of home and some of the growth possibilities and capabilities. So I know I really didn't answer the question, but that's kind of how I roll. So here you go.
So within your role then, how does out-of-home sort of fit? How does out-of-home either touch you, or do you touch out-of-home? Because obviously the different agencies, holdcos are set up in slightly different ways, either integrated, slightly separate in terms of planning and buying. How does that work, Kelly?
Well, we do have a dedicated business unit called Outdoor Media Group, as we like to call them, the OMG inside OMG. And we partner very closely with them, but it could always be better, right? So one of the challenges we're constantly facing is, if we're not upstream in the strategic planning process, we cannot treat this business unit as just a buying arm, because there's so much more than that. So how do we bring them into a fully integrated planning process at the start of the conversation with the client? And that's something we're evolving right now, but it really is going to start with data sets and tools that this industry brings forward for planning, and how we can actually measure and manage the performance or the potential performance of out of home vis-a-vis every other channel on the table.
Mm-hmm. Brian?
From a strategic perspective, well, I'll say first off, at RPA, we don't have an OMG type direct investment team. We work with third parties on the investment side of out of home when it's part of our mix. But as we think about it, the way it touches my client's business, of course, it's going to vary client to client. But for us, it's always about what can out of home bring to the strategic approach, to the plan, the campaign, the experience we're trying to build. What can it bring that's complementary and different, differentiating? That's how we often think about it. And it's funny, the thing I was thinking about this morning was the term out of home is so expansive. If you think about the breadth of what's included in that bucket, right? I mean, it's just such a variety of experiences and exposures and connection points that it's a really broad brush. And so the way we use it is going to be so varied, again, depending on client objectives. It's always going to be tailored and unique, I would say.
And we, similar to OMD, we have rapport within IPG Media Brands, which we all sit in the same building. We work very collaboratively together, and they are definitely the subject matter experts. But from an investment standpoint, we try not to put out of home in a silo. I mean, similar to out of home, we also have a separate team that manages all of our biddable media. But when we talk to clients from an investment standpoint, a go-to-market approach, we're thinking holistically across channels. And I think even more so now that out of home has become more digitized, and you can think about audiences and data in the same way that you do other channels. It's become part of a larger, more like holistic cross-channel conversation. And so when we talk about go-to-market approach, when we talk about our important partnerships, out of home is always, if out of home is important to that client, out of home is as much a part of that conversation. And then again, I'm not able to answer very granular level questions about the marketplace, but I know when to bring in the right people. And
so where's that decision point? You're speaking very positively about out of home and how it fits. Where's that decision point of, actually we're going to use out of home for this brand or this opportunity? Where does that decision point happen now? When the world is so complex, there's so much opportunity out there. What's that decision point?
I would argue it would start with strategy, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's the strategist. I'm like, hey,
it's his.
My choice. No, but I mean, that's what strategy teams are there to do, and I think certainly collaboratively with our friends in the investment side of the house. But
sometimes you're very expensive. Okay, strategy can come up with a lot of really good ideas that are really expensive, and it's our jobs to check them.
We're the dreamers.
Yeah, we're the dreamers.
And we're the dream killers.
But no, I think that's where it begins. I will say, I mean, the challenge so many times, and again, it's going to depend on the client's business, but so many times clients need/expect a certain level of foundational tried and true to their campaigns, right? And in an era of budget challenges they may face, what's left over can be the place in which we are ideating for something that could include out of home, right? But first, the television or the video or the digital layer, social, whatever it is. And so sometimes out of home is challenged to get in the mix, to be a part of that conversation. I will say though, I'm heartened for the future. Another thing I was thinking about this morning is, as budget challenges are continuing to get greater and greater for so many clients, I think we are increasingly doing things from a local perspective that we haven't always done before. I will tell you, so many CMOs I'm talking to today are open to conversations of a national local hybrid approach to their business because they can't execute full footprint US with the dollars they may have to work with the way they used to in the past. And so we're making choices about local markets, and the moment we start diving into local markets and the unique executional opportunities that out of home can play, because it's not going to be the same in every market, then we start tailoring into some very interesting experiences that we can bring to life in markets of their selection. So I feel like that's where the decision happens oftentimes, is within strategy, but thinking about what we can do and where we can find a place to differentiate.
And Kelly, you talked a little bit earlier when we weren't on stage about sort of the national, local, fulcrum and where that decision. Do you want to explain a little bit more about that?
Well, we were talking about it specifically in the context of automotive, and I think everyone in this room would understand that Tier 1 automotive budgets are a little more sizable than Tier 2. And Tier 2 is local, let's be real. Tier 2, Tier 3 is local. So if you want to get access to the national budgets, you have to show up nationally. This is just the reality of what we're looking at when we're planning an automotive campaign on a national basis. And the nuance to that is, you can show up nationally and out of home, but perhaps we're not seeing the data in the strategic layer that we need to make those decisions about allocating the dollars there. And I do think that that is the fundamental gap for strategists today, is the planning tools don't appropriately represent all that is possible.
So can you explain that a little bit more, just to unpack it?
Yeah, so let's just compare another channel, like our good partners in social media. We love them, don't we? They will work with us pretty deliberately to customize planning solutions for their platforms, because they know that we are not representing small businesses, right? Which is what their self-service platforms are primarily built for. So we get pretty granular, detailed data sets to support reach analysis across custom audiences for most of these partners. Mm-hmm. And out-of-home needs to be doing that. Every partner in out-of-home that has the data, and a lot of you do, needs to be looking at how do we show up in these planning tools across these agency holdcos? How do we get the strategists smarter about what's possible? Mm-hmm. It's gonna start with basic media planning. What is the reach potential across my footprint? And how do we show up in specific markets? Basic questions.
I would push on top of that, in addition to that we've got to get, I just saw the news about the MRC approach to out-of-home measurement that was just the announcement made the other day. I forget the phrase, something to the tune of exclusive of audience was the phrasing there.
That's a bit dodgy.
I would like to get to inclusive as soon as possible. I mean, it matters. It's a client expectation that we have some sense of the who behind the what we do.
Yeah. And Marcy, what's your view on this sort of what happens next and what out-of-home needs to do?
I mean, I think measurement, not necessarily just from a planning standpoint, but overall measurement, I think needs to evolve. There's still not a consistent standard form of measurement, and there's so many, I think you were saying just how complex, I mean, out of home, it means so many different things. There's so many different tactics, and there's still a lot of disparate measurement. And taking that a step further, I think while a lot of partners have come up with ways to really measure, to close the loop and measure a full funnel, I think the ability to really understand how to drive business outcomes is still a challenge. I don't know if we're going to talk about MMM, but that is still sort of the holy grail for a lot of clients and how they measure success. And sometimes MMM doesn't do the best job of represent out of home in the best way. And so I think that hurts. And clients that are really focused on real-time performance, out of home is a tough channel to measure because you can't truly deliver in most tactics that one-to-one connection and prove out conversion immediately. And so I think for those, again, for the lower funnel objectives, that can be a challenge.
I mean, the industry's come a long way in terms of lower funnel metrics and having some level of attribution to prove out those outcomes. Do you want to, let's dig into MMM for a minute, because we were talking about it earlier, weren't we? There's a bit of a chicken and egg with MMM. Do you want to talk about that, Kelly?
I mean, I just love talking about MMM. Who doesn't? So one of the challenges that we all mutually recognize is the problem with MMM is it shows you what you did. It only looks at the channels and the media you have already purchased. It doesn't look at the potential. And this is where out-of-home is suffering. So how do you change the way you're looking at MMMs, right? You have to be able to understand not only the framework that your client is operating in from an MM perspective, but how you can actually inject new data sets into it to reevaluate, recalibrate. And again, it goes back to the data problem with out-of-home, right? If you're going to influence an MMM result, you have to have the data there to begin with. How do I get the data there if they didn't purchase from me? Mm-hmm. This has to be the problem that you solve. Mm-hmm. And I think that will continue to be a problem in terms of showing up in MMM. I mean, Marcy and I were discussing that it's really easy to work with clients who show up with out-of-home historically on the plan. Great, we can grow, it's fine. Mm-hmm. If they've never purchased out-of-home before, that's really hard.
So how does that get fixed? What's the ignition that can happen to change that, to start the change of that process? Because it feels like a vicious circle to a certain extent.
Well, what I have seen be successful is honestly coming from strategy, and it's the breakthrough moment that out-of-home can provide. So truly something innovative, experiential, something that really changes the game for the client in a specific market. This gets them thinking about out-of-home and how they're going to leverage this across social, across other channels, and then that's your way in.
I would also say, for client questions that come up when they have a modeling tool, and even if they don't, just based on agency relationships, we can get them blinded data from other client studies in many cases, case study, et cetera. But the MMM partners can help us make the case for out of home and the contribution it makes to business outcomes as a way of by proxy showing what it's done for others. It's a bit of a leap then for that client to take that and be willing to take a step forward based on someone else's results, and yet we do it all the time.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think anytime that you can quantify what they should expect from an outcome standpoint and prove that it's going to drive their business, and then hopefully prove it out on the back end is going to help sell it in. But I also think, while for a lot of clients MMM is the end all be all, I think out of home can be used for a lot more than just driving ROI. I think you were saying, I think it's one of the places you can be the most creative. I tend to, anytime I'm in a brainstorm, I feel like the best idea I have, which unfortunately not everyone always agrees, but is some form of from out-of-home execution. I also think from an impact standpoint, we do have a lot of clients who really want, not necessarily Times Square, but they want big, impactful billboards in airports, in high traffic areas that really, if the creative is good, can get people talking about it. And I think there's an earned value that can come with that may not, again, prove out in a short-term ROI, but has long-term brand building impact.
But boy, do clients love a good vanity out-of-home experience in Times Square.
They
really do.
They sure do.
The other thing I think that's really great about what MMM can get for us is we've done some custom analyses for clients that point to business outcomes not only in year one, but in future years. And we've been able to show for several different clients that a lot of the upper funnel brand building, awareness driving work that is done has a certain amount of impact in year one, but had incremental impact in years 2 through 4. That same dollar I spent in here is still driving sales over here years later. And out of home shines in that analysis, particularly the bigger experiential stuff that really gives someone an experience that gets filed away, if you will. So I think it's a tool that can really evangelize, truly, if the right analyses are done.
And one of the things you talked about, Kelly, was out of home sort of fitting with other media, so especially social. And again, this sort of setup of how it's either integrated or not, subject to the planning process, subject to the buying process. Do you know what I mean? Do you want to enlarge on that?
Well, it's really the breakthrough moment, right? That's going to sell the client, and it's truly the end-to-end experience. So it really is coming from strategy for the most part, but it's never just, I want a billboard in this location. Sometimes it is.
Sometimes.
But most of the time, it's how do I create this on this date with this experience, with this level of exposure that I'm then going to amplify across all the social platforms, and I'm going to get this potential celebrity to be integrated into that experience, and they're going to do this photo op, and we're going to expand from here. I mean, everything is so calculated to a pinpoint of execution, and out of home is the backdrop. And that is the experience that the client is looking for, and that's what helps you break through.
What about sort of technical innovation? Lots of change, whether it's the channels, whether it's we were talking about AI. I don't really want to touch on AI, but do you know what sort of technical innovation do you think can help drive out-of-home growth?
Well, broken record, but the planning data. You got to get the planning data in there. Truly, I mean, but if you look at why we look at out-of-home, it's because you're breaking the mold. So the moment you become stale or just another unit is really death, honestly. It's where you become a commodity. The thing that I see that's so exciting about what's happening in out-of-home is, damn, those screens keep getting bigger. I don't know how you do it, but those screens keep getting bigger, and the moment and the impact and everything that out-of-home is doing around digital right now is so compelling. And embrace that, I would say. That's key.
I was going to say, keeping pace with the technological innovations of smartphones and what you can do to create a back and forth experience. To me, that's where the power is, especially in getting people to look up, right? I mean, we all see the people walking around cities just like this, crossing the street. God forbid they get hit by a car. But getting people to look up, have an experience that is a two-way experience. I think there's power there.
I think there's technology that can help on the back end from a planning and buying standpoint, but then also some technology that can just make the impact of the units better. So I think automation to continue to make planning, not just from a planning tool standpoint, but when we're RFPing a partner to be able to get the list of boards in a more automated fashion. I think with programmatic and the more that we can integrate out-of-home data and targeting with other channels so that you can holistically measure your reach and frequency against a specific audience. I think that's something that's going to also just enable out-of-home at lower budgets to maybe be part of that national mix. But then also, I think technology in terms of, I'm going to say the word wrong, but like anamorphic creative on larger boards, the ability to use AR and VR and make boards sort of come to life and interact with them. Those I think are also really unique ways that we can, and things that can't be done sometimes in a more traditional medium, I think can all help propel it.
So listen, all this sounds really positive. I'm taking a very positive, notwithstanding some of the things that need to happen, data, MMM, do you know what I mean? Some level of greater alignment. What do you think is going to happen in the next couple of years with your businesses and investment in out-of-home?
Yeah, you're the strategist. What do you say?
I see growth opportunity. Well, it's funny because I was thinking about, this piggybacks on your question about automotive, because I work on Honda and Acura as well as many of the tier 2 dealer groups. I think there's a lot of local investment that's going to be going on. And I'll tell you, beyond just budget challenges, the world of EVs is inherently geographic, right? The demand is uneven, and thus I can tell you the car allocation is uneven accordingly. And so there is a lot of launch work that we're doing that is local first. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to lean into that. That's where a lot of the money is going to go. Now, certainly, the world of EV adoption is going to ebb and flow, and there's pushback, and the election this fall could determine a little bit of those outcomes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But
did you
long
have to bring
term,
up the election?
I know, I'm sorry, but I'm just saying.
You said you weren't going to.
As someone in auto, it's got direct implications. But I think that local has every bit of upside to how we plan. It's grown in the last 18 months already. It will continue to grow for us.
Kelly?
Yeah.
I generally would see growth, largely because there are new capabilities coming online, and you mentioned that two-way integration between the phone and the largest screen in the world. We're actually seeing quite a bit of innovation around the phone, the TV, and I mean a lot of outdoor capabilities can tie true brand experiences all the way through to the outdoor experience, and I think that really is going to drive a lot of interest and a lot of growth in the coming years. But I mean, I will be frank, it is a tough marketplace out there. Things are soft. Budgets are not exactly growing across the board. So you got to fight for every dollar. It is truly, truly a very soft marketplace out there. So you're going to see growth, but you're not going to see that predictable growth that this industry desperately wants to see until you are truly integrated into the planning tools and you're there and you show up for every campaign.
And I want to be realistic. I'm speaking very positively about it because I do feel like there's a lot of positives in the marketplace, but I don't necessarily see clients that haven't been investing in the space all of a sudden just going 0 to 60. I do think within the space there will be continued shifts into digital and programmatic out of home. And I do think that as that grows, that clients who maybe haven't been dipping in, if digital is a big part of their plan, which it is for many, that's an easier way into out of home. You don't necessarily have to produce different creative. You don't have to completely change your planning approach. So I do see that could be an easier way in for those that are not in the space today.
So listen, we've got about a minute left. Just one quick question then. What advice would you give the industry? A lot of people in the room, have vested interest in the business, the industry growing. What's the one salutary piece of advice that you'd offer right now to help drive the industry? From all the discussion that we've had, what would it be, Marcy?
I think the standardization of measurement is just, again, because of the complexity in the space, and not just standardization across out of home, but if we can get it to be standardized with other channels as well. I think that's a way that we can continue to prove its efficacy, and also prove its efficacy for people that are already doing it, but also incentivize those that may not be doing it to invest.
Kelly?
Well, I think I've already said it 85 times. So I think the measurement is key, but having been in the measurement game, I know how complex that is, and how to normalize those impressions is an incredibly difficult task, particularly when you look at viewshed multiples. So this is not an easy solve. I don't see it being solved in the next 12 months. I do think the basics, the blocking and tackling that this industry can do around getting the data sets to strategy, getting them into the right tools, and that is possible in the next 12 months. If you're sitting on it, you need to start offering it up, and you need to start making it really easy for agencies to ingest it.
And piggyback kind of on both those thoughts. To me, measurement is key here. I was reading a lot about the new protocols that were established via the MRC process, and I just don't want to see us go down the path that we're all navigating in the world of television and video right now with multiple currencies and all kinds. I mean, it's just like, good God, as if we needed more challenges in our day-to-day life. So to me, simplicity of measurement and inclusive of understanding of audience. It can't be, we can't value the world of out-of-home based on tonnage.
Correct.
It can't just be, oh, well, it's a $2 CPM because 1 billion people saw the billboard. I mean, that's the quickest way to lose credibility with a client, to claim some astronomical number of meaningful impressions. So we've got to get to a point where the way we value the impressions matter, and they stand kind of toe-to-toe horizontally across other channels.
So listen, growth's for the taking, but we've got to go after it as an industry. So really appreciate your insights and your comments, Marcy, Brian, Kelly. Thanks for joining us this morning. Really, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Clive.
Thank you.